The Appalachian wilderness is as breathtaking as it is untamed, a place where nature's balance is both beautiful and brutal. 16-year-old Emily Davis had spent her whole life in these woods, learning their secrets from her father, a veteran forest ranger. But nothing could have prepared her for what she discovered one crisp morning along the Eastern Trail. A desperate cry echoed through the trees. Following the sound, Emily stumbled upon a scene that made her heart race. A poacher, a struggling canvas sack, and the unmistakable whimper of something small, something wild. What happened next was a decision made in an instant, but one that would change everything. Because sometimes the most unexpected bonds aren't formed in comfort, but in the fight for survival. This is the story of a girl, a bobcat, and a rescue that would become the beginning of something extraordinary.
The early morning mist hung low over the Appalachian forests of Western Virginia, where ancient oaks and maples stood sentinel over generations of wildlife that called these woods home. At the edge of this wilderness, in a modest ranger's cabin, 16-year-old Emily Davis was already awake, lacing up her well-worn hiking boots. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold, promising another beautiful day in the Jefferson National Forest. Emily had grown up in these woods, learning their secrets from her father, Mark Davis, who had served as a forest ranger for over 2 decades. Their cabin, though small, was a testament to their dedication to protecting the wilderness. The walls were adorned with wildlife photographs, many taken by Emily herself, and educational posters about local flora and fauna. A particular favorite was a detailed illustration of the native bobcat population, which had faced increasing threats from poaching in recent years. "Early start today, kiddo?" Mark asked, emerging from the kitchen with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. His weathered face creased into a warm smile as he handed one to his daughter. Emily nodded, accepting the mug gratefully. "I want to check the Eastern Trail before school. Something didn't feel right when I was there yesterday." She had inherited her father's intuition for the forest's rhythms, and lately, those rhythms had felt off-kilter. Mark's expression grew serious. "You noticed it too? I've been getting reports of unusual activity in that sector. Remember the rules?" "I know, Dad," Emily interrupted with a gentle eye roll. "Stay alert, keep my radio on, and don't engage with suspicious characters. I've been doing this since I was 12. Her father chuckled, but his eyes remained concerned. "Just because you've been my junior ranger for 4 years doesn't mean I stop worrying. The eastern sector has been giving me headaches lately. 3 reports of suspicious vehicles in the past week alone." Emily finished her hot chocolate and grabbed her backpack, already packed with her usual patrol gear: first aid kit, water bottles, trail mix, and her cherished camera. Photography wasn't just a hobby for her. It was a way to document the forest's health and any signs of disturbance. The morning air was crisp as Emily set out on her patrol. She had an hour before she needed to head to school, and she intended to make the most of it. The Eastern Trail was one of her favorites, winding through dense undergrowth and rocky outcrops that provided perfect habitats for the local wildlife. As she walked, Emily noticed subtle changes in the forest's morning chorus. The usual cheerful cacophony of birdsong seemed muted, interrupted by occasional periods of complete silence, a sure sign that something was disturbing the natural order. Her father had taught her that animals were the first to sense when something was amiss. 20 minutes into her patrol, Emily froze. There, in the soft earth beside the trail, was a fresh tire track, far too deep to be from a regular park visitor's vehicle. The Forest Service used specific access points, and this section of the trail was strictly off-limits to motorized vehicles. Someone had deliberately broken the rules. Emily pulled out her camera and carefully documented the tracks, noting their direction and depth. As she photographed the evidence, a sound caught her attention: a weak, plaintive cry that seemed to come from somewhere deeper in the forest. It was barely audible, but something about it tugged at her heart. Checking her watch, Emily knew she should head back soon for school. But that cry, it didn't sound like any of the usual forest residents. It seemed desperate, almost like a call for help. Making sure her radio was secure on her belt, she carefully moved off the trail, following the sound. The undergrowth grew thicker as she pushed deeper into the forest. Thorny bushes caught at her jacket, but Emily pressed on, driven by an inexplicable urgency. The crying grew slightly louder, and now she could tell it was coming from behind a dense thicket of mountain laurel. As she approached, movement caught her eye. A flash of camouflage clothing that definitely didn't belong to any Forest Service personnel. Emily quickly ducked behind a large oak tree, her heart pounding. Through the leaves, she could make out a man crouching near the ground, stuffing something into a large canvas sack. The cry came again, this time clearly from within the sack, and Emily's blood ran cold. She recognized it now. It was a bobcat cub, and from the sound of it, a very young one. Bobcat cubs were incredibly rare to encounter. They were usually carefully hidden by their mothers in secure dens. Emily's mind raced. Where was the mother? Had something happened to her? The poaching problems her father had mentioned suddenly took on a horrifying new dimension. She pulled out her radio, ready to call for backup, but hesitated. By the time help arrived, the poacher could be long gone, and with him, the frightened cub. Drawing on every lesson her father had taught her about wildlife confrontations, Emily made a decision. She couldn't let this man take the cub. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out from behind the tree, making sure to position herself between the poacher and the most likely escape route. "Excuse me," she called out firmly, proud that her voice didn't shake despite her racing heart. "This is a restricted area. I'm going to need to see your Forest Service permit." The man jerked upright, clutching the sack closer. He was middle-aged, with a scraggly beard and clothes that had seen better days. His eyes darted between Emily and the forest behind her, calculating. "Just out for a morning walk," he said gruffly. "Didn't see any signs saying it was restricted." Emily stood her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to run. "There's a clearly marked sign at the trailhead, and that doesn't explain what you have in that sack." She gestured to the canvas bag, from which another weak cry emerged. The man's expression hardened. "None of your business, little girl. Why don't you run along to school?" "I'm a junior ranger," Emily declared, pulling out her official ID card. "And anything involving wildlife in this forest is absolutely my business. What you're doing is illegal, and I've already documented your presence here." She held up her camera for emphasis, though she had no idea if any of her photos had captured the man's face. The poacher took a threatening step forward, but Emily stood her ground. "You're bluffing. No one else is out here this early." "Wrong again," Emily replied, her finger hovering over her radio's call button. "This is my regular patrol route, and my father, the head ranger, is expecting my check-in any minute now." This wasn't entirely true, but Emily knew the power of a well-placed bluff. As if on cue, her radio crackled to life. "Emily, check in please. Over." Her father's voice had never been more welcome. The poacher's confidence wavered visibly. Emily seized the moment of uncertainty, her voice growing stronger. "Put the sack down and leave. Now, or I call this in, and you'll have the entire Forest Service and local police here in minutes." For a tense moment, Emily thought the man might charge her. But then, with a curse, he dropped the sack and turned, crashing through the undergrowth. Emily waited until his footsteps faded before rushing to the sack, her hands trembling as she carefully opened it. Inside, a tiny bobcat cub lay curled in a tight ball, its spotted fur matted and dirty. It couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, and its eyes were wide with terror. Emily's heart broke at the sight. The cub was clearly malnourished, its small body trembling with fear and exhaustion. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, carefully examining the cub without touching it. "You're safe now." Emily quickly radioed her father, her voice urgent but controlled. "Dad, I need you at marker E7 immediately. I've got an abandoned bobcat cub, possibly orphaned." The poacher fled west toward the old logging road. Mark's response was immediate. "Stay put. I'm on my way. Don't approach the cub unless absolutely necessary." But as Emily waited, she could see the cub's condition was dire. It was severely dehydrated, and its breathing seemed labored. Making a careful decision, she pulled out a small bottle of water and her cleanest bandana. Soaking the cloth, she gently offered it to the cub, allowing it to lick the moisture without forcing any interaction. The sound of approaching footsteps announced her father's arrival. Mark took in the scene quickly, his experienced eyes assessing the situation. "Good work, Emily. But this little one needs help fast. Where's the mother?" "No sign of her," Emily reported, fighting back tears. "Dad, the poacher. He must have known exactly where to find this cub. What if he—" Mark placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll investigate, but right now, this little one needs our help. We can't leave it here." Together, they carefully transferred the cub into a proper wildlife carrier from Mark's truck. Emily sat in the back with the carrier, speaking softly to the frightened animal as they drove to the cabin. She knew they should probably take it to a wildlife rehabilitation center, but the nearest one was hours away, and the cub needed immediate care. At home, they converted their mudroom into a temporary recovery space, keeping it quiet and warm. Emily missed school that day, but her father agreed it was for a good cause. They took turns feeding the cub a special formula recommended by the wildlife vet over the phone, and slowly, hour by hour, the tiny creature began to show signs of improvement. As days turned into weeks, the cub, whom Emily had started calling Shadow for his habit of following her around the mud room, grew stronger. Emily spent every free moment with him, carefully documenting his recovery and ensuring he maintained his natural wariness of humans, despite their close contact. Mark watched their interaction with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're doing a wonderful job with him, Emily," he said one evening, as they watched Shadow successfully tackle his first solid food. "But you know we can't keep him forever." Emily nodded, though her heart clenched at the thought. "I know, Dad. He belongs in the wild. I want to make sure he's ready." The next few months were a delicate balance of caring for Shadow while preparing him for his eventual return to the wild. Emily researched extensively, consulting with wildlife experts and studying bobcat behavior. She and her father created supervised outdoor experiences for Shadow in their fenced backyard, helping him develop the skills he would need to survive. As Shadow grew, so did his strength and natural instincts. The tiny, frightened cub transformed into a magnificent young bobcat, his spotted coat gleaming with health. Yet despite his growing independence, he maintained a special bond with Emily. He would often sit near her while she did her homework in the mud room, his presence a comfortable reminder of their shared journey. The story of Shadow's rescue spread through the local community thanks to Emily's photographs and her father's connections. It sparked important conversations about wildlife conservation and the impact of poaching on local ecosystems. Emily was even invited to speak at her school, sharing her experience and educating her peers about the importance of protecting wild animals. Finally, after 4 months of rehabilitation, the day came that Emily had been both anticipating and dreading. Shadow was ready to return to the wild. The wildlife vet had given his approval, and they had selected a perfect release site deep in the protected area of the forest, far from any known poaching activities. The morning of the release was clear and cool, the forest seemingly holding its breath. Emily and Mark transported Shadow to the chosen location, a secluded valley with plenty of natural cover and prey animals. Emily's hands trembled as she opened the carrier door, her eyes already filling with tears. Shadow emerged cautiously, his muscular body tense with anticipation. He took a few steps forward, then turned to look back at Emily, as if seeking reassurance. In that moment, all the memories of their time together flooded through her mind. The late-night feedings, the first time he played with a toy, the way he would purr softly when she read her textbooks aloud to him. "Go on," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "This is your home now." Shadow hesitated for another moment, then suddenly darted forward into the undergrowth. He paused at the edge of a thicket, looking back one final time. Emily raised her camera, capturing that last glimpse of him, strong, healthy, and wild, exactly as he was meant to be. As they walked back to the truck, Mark wrapped an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "You did good, kiddo. Really good." Emily wiped her eyes, managing a smile. "Do you think he'll be okay?" "Thanks to you, he has the best possible chance," Mark assured her. "And his story will help protect other animals like him." In the months that followed, Emily threw herself into wildlife conservation with renewed passion. She started a student advocacy group at her school and worked with her father to implement new anti-poaching measures in the forest. Though she missed Shadow terribly, she knew that their brief time together had changed both their lives for the better. A year after Shadow's release, Emily was back on her morning patrol when she noticed something unusual: fresh bobcat tracks in the mud near the Eastern Trail. Following them cautiously, she came to a small clearing where the morning sun filtered through the canopy. There, watching her with familiar golden eyes, sat a healthy adult bobcat. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The bobcat's spotted coat was darker now, but she would recognize those eyes anywhere. For a long moment, they regarded each other across the clearing, no longer as rescuer and rescued, but as two beings sharing the same wild space. Then, with a flick of his tail that almost seemed like a wave goodbye, Shadow disappeared into the forest, leaving behind a single, perfect paw print in the soft earth. Emily photographed it with tears in her eyes, knowing that this was the greatest gift she could have received, proof that sometimes letting go doesn't mean goodbye forever. That evening, as Emily added the new photograph to her wildlife journal, she reflected on everything she had learned from her experience with Shadow. Love sometimes meant having the courage to let go, and the truest form of compassion was helping others find their way back to where they belonged. The story of the girl who saved a bobcat became more than just a tale of rescue. It became a testament to the extraordinary bonds that can form between humans and wildlife, and a reminder that every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change lives and inspire others to make a difference in the world. Years later, Emily would go on to become a wildlife biologist, dedicating her life to protecting animals like Shadow. And though she encountered many other wild creatures in her career, she never forgot the little bobcat cub who taught her that the heart of conservation lies not in keeping wild things close, but in giving them the freedom to be wild. The end of Emily and Shadow's direct story became the beginning of something much larger, a lifetime committed to ensuring that future generations would have the chance to experience the same wild beauty that had captured her heart on that fateful morning in the Jefferson National Forest. And somewhere in those vast woods, a bobcat with golden eyes continued to roam free, a living testament to the power of compassion and the enduring bond between humans and the wild world they strive to protect.